Can you guys talk about your experiences, like, growing up as a Copt in Canada? So, like, talking about, like, school, your experience in school, or your family, jobs. Like, has that had an impact on, like, your social lives at school, or, like, your experiences, I guess? Like,
I think that growing up as a Coptic person, it's kind of hard to connect with certain people who don't share your faith. So if you can only be friends with someone to a certain extent, because when it comes to your beliefs, it kind of, like, starts to clash a little bit, but, like, friendships are still possible, just not in this extent that you can share faith or just, like, fully speak your mind.
yeah, so it was, like, in high school, it's, like, really, really hard to talk to people about your faith and to bring it up and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
because you don't know who stands where on what subject.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, like, suppressing a part of yourself because you don't know how others will respond.
What do you guys think? Like,
A lot of the time when you say that you're Coptic Orthodox, people don't know what that is. And then you tell them it's like a denomination of Christianity, and then they just bring up the stereotypical things that people say about Christians. So it kind of sucks in that sense, because you want to prove them wrong, that, like, we're not all about the stereotypes and we're more open-minded than people think. But overall, most people are pretty curious to see, like, what we have to say and what our faith is about. They just typically assume that you're Catholic for the most part. So it's interesting to see how people take different denominations and learning about the faith.
what about you guys? What do you think? Do you have anything to add?
I think for me, at least, I feel like a lot of the time when we tell people, like, we're Coptic Orthodox, for me at least, it's usually because they know I'm vegan for a certain period of time, and they're like, why are you vegan all of a sudden? What's that going to do? What's that going to help? And they kind of, like, their perspective is kind of shifted from, oh, this is for a religious purpose, to kind of like a cultural thing. Like, oh, these Egyptians usually do this for a certain period of time. They don't really realize, like, why do you go vegan? Because, like you were saying before, like, it's kind of hard to differentiate, like, friendships that you're really going to connect with on, like, a Coptic quote-unquote level, whereas you're just, like, talking to a friend that you don't really share that common denominator with.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add?
I think fasting was one of the hardest things to do growing up, because people confused. They don't understand why you're doing it. So you're vegan for a certain period of time. And it's hard to explain to them, because they assume that it's, like, cultish. Especially when because you're like, it's a small, like, denomination. They're like, oh, who are they? So but it's better that you tell them than it is when people assume, oh, you're from Egypt and you must be a different religion. Like, there's no way there are other, like, Coptic Christians out there type thing. It's also, like, really difficult to pick a place to eat. Yeah. It's like, oh, what can you have? There's, like, carbs and fruits.
No, but now it's getting easier, because now being vegan is the trend almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So, speaking of, like, stereotypes, do you guys ever feel, like, pressure to fit into that, like, the cookie cutter Christian? Like, you have to be, like, you can't swear, you can't do any of these things. Like, people can tell by my actions, like, if I'm Christian or not. Did you guys, like, was that a challenge for you guys, like, even in school? Like fitting into the Christian, like, like,
model?
you have to be the best. Like, you have to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort
of.
Honestly, like, for me at least, again, I feel like it's the bad stereotypes that people expect from you from being a Christian. So whenever someone sees me, they're like, oh, they're probably going to think they're better than everyone else. You know what I mean? Once you tell them, like, I am this kind of denomination, it doesn't matter. They just hear the word Christian and they just automatically assume, like, we're all the same, and, you know, we're all just, like, kind of thinking we're superior to everyone else, which is obviously not the case.
I think the media has a huge role in it. Every time you look at, like, any TV shows and they show Christians, they always show someone who's like, oh, you can't do this. If you have, like, sex before marriage, I'm going to judge you, and, like, all this other stuff, which, no one is really like that. No one is that judgment. Well, most people are not like that. Most. But yeah, like, I feel actually the opposite. Like, it's not that I want to fit into a certain mold. I want to prove that these molds don't necessarily meet each Christian, and, like, we're all individuals.
I think people misunderstand the conception of Christianity, which is, oh, if they're a Christian, they must be perfect and they have to do everything perfectly. When it's actually the opposite. We're trying to improve. We still make mistakes, but the point is that, like, Christ has taken that and we're just dealing with everyday life. So we're trying to achieve, like, goodness. It doesn't mean we won't fall occasionally.
Yeah. Okay. So, you guys also mentioned that, like, whenever I bring up, like, to someone that I'm from Egypt, they automatically assume that I'm like Muslim, and I'm not, and it makes me feel super uncomfortable. So like for me, I do not like to identify myself as an Arab, even though I do speak Arabic. I do not consider myself Arab. Like I consider myself like Coptic. So do you guys have that same feeling? Like you don't like it when someone calls you Arab? Like it's like, because it's associated with something negative.
Yeah.
So do you guys feel that way too?
I'm pretty like I'm okay with anything pretty much.
Yeah.
I think for them it's more like they don't understand the difference between Arabic, Egyptian, Coptic. So it's just they're trying to identify what you are. So I kind of just accept it. Unless they want to know more, then I'll tell them. A lot of the time, actually, I get identified by the tattoo, the cross tattoo, the Coptic cross, because it's so. Some people say it's a compass, but the people who do know Coptics, they can be like, oh yeah, I had a Coptic friend once, and they said that this was the Coptic symbol, so they can identify you quickly through that.
I think Arab is only like a negative thing to people who are ignorant.
Yeah.
Like, but also I don't think we are like Arab or Egyptian. Like speaking personally, like we're like I was born and raised in Canada, so like the Egyptian extent only goes as far as how well I can speak Arabic and like how Egyptian my parents. Like my blood is Egyptian, but I'm not like I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
And I'm Coptic, but like if I spent like 2 days in Egypt, I would have no idea what I'm doing. Like I'm not like it's not my home, you know. Like,
I agree. Like I also like I would probably identify myself Canadian before like Coptic, because like I was born here, I was raised here. I haven't like been to Egypt in like 15 years, so like do you guys like have any other ideas about that?
What were you gonna say?
Do you have something to say about that? No? Okay.
I don't remember what I was gonna say.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you.
Dang it.
It's fine.
Now I have to.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, even in Christian denominations that are different than ours, people identify us by our crucifixes.
Yeah.
So I walked to a prayer to change, and they knew I was Coptic. So I like that we have some recognition. So I do like to identify myself as Coptic, and Egyptian actually. I know. Like,
That's interesting.
I do like to identify as Egyptian.
Yeah.
Because it's still in my blood, and I like
You're proud
having
of it.
like that heritage. Yeah.
I agree.
I think because Canada is very like it's full of immigrants. We're all immigrants, so it's interesting to see how everyone kind of respects each other's different beliefs and cultures, and they want to learn. Like a lot of the time when I see someone who's like from a Hindu heritage, I want to learn, I want to understand their culture. So I think it's the same thing here, which is why I prefer actually identifying as Coptic, Orthodox, Egyptian, just because people always ask questions and they want to know more about it. Kind of it's like an intro to asking about the faith. So
Like it starts the conversation is what you mean.
yeah, and it's not always like you're trying to recruit them to your church. It's just like more about knowledge and like not being ignorant.
Yeah.
I agree.
To go back to your previous question, I think there's like a misconception both ways. Like if we like yes we do as Christians have a job to represent Christ as he was, and then people like if you do, I think there's a sort of misconception, but like we have a misconception, so we say but we're not. People say like you should be behaving like in a perfect way, and then we say but we're not perfect, like only Christ was perfect. I think that we'd like to hide behind the idea that no one's perfect rather than choosing to alter our behavior, because even though we are not perfect, we are supposed to be different, and we're supposed to represent Christ in a certain way. That's not to say we won't screw up from time to time, but I think there's like a misideal both ways. Like we say we're not perfect, and they say but you're Christian, like you know what I mean. Like people are supposed to be able to, because we're supposed to be a reflection of Christ's light, and if we're not, people can tell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like even if we're not perfect, there should be that like Christ aspect. Like people should be like, why is this person so different?
Yeah.
But
Like so you're saying like try to make the effort kind of thing.
exactly, like
To be
don't
different.
not do anything and just be like, no one's perfect. You know what I mean? Like that's I feel like that's just lazy.
I think when you think about like a good Christian in your life, like someone who you look up to, a lot of the time it's not like they're just preaching everything. They're actually doing it through their actions, and it's not like they're saying, oh yeah, this is like Christ-like. It's more like they're just showing pure love. And I think that's what people should look for when they're like trying to understand Christianity, because at the media, the way they approach it is like they have to obey this, they have to do this. It's like all about rules, when it's really it's all about loving people and trying to improve yourself, like you were saying, and seeing your imperfections. Like it's identifying your imperfections and just like moving forward from there.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of like actions and trying to be like the best version of ourselves, I guess. Like, do you guys, so how are you guys active, like, within the church? Like, do you guys, like, for me, so personally, when I see something in the church that I don't like, or, you know, like, I try to be active in a way where I try to improve that kind of thing. So do you guys find that you guys do that as well, or?
I think the older I've gotten, the more problems I'm starting to see. Like, I'm kind of like taking a critical standpoint, like a critical view on the church and how it operates sometimes. I noticed that there's a lot of like, I don't know, some like underlying issues that nobody really thinks are important, like girl on girl hate, stuff like that within the church. And I think that's so important to address. And I feel like the older I've gotten, the more I'm aware of it and trying to, you know, kind of just dial it down and not like associate myself with that kind of behavior, because that does at the end of the day paint a bigger picture to people that are just walking into the church and they see stuff like that. They're not going to see like what you were saying before, like Christianity is all about love. They're going to see these people are talking about each other within the church. You guys are all Coptic. Why are you guys doing that? So that's going to be associated with Christianity as a whole to people that don't know anything about being Coptic or being Christian.
Yeah, and I think that also has an effect on us. Like, for me, like, I didn't leave the church, but I could have been more involved when I was younger. But, like, I wasn't comfortable with the people around me, so I went to a Presbyterian church for like, a few years, and then I came back once we started coming to SMSV. So, did you guys, like, used to attend a different church? And, like, why did you guys leave that church? Like, and, like, why are you guys at SMSV, like, or, like, St. Mark's or whatever? Why are you guys, like, what attracted you to the church, like, right now?
I'm like super grateful that a church like SMSV exists, because a lot of churches are, well, I haven't seen another church like SMSV, because SMSV is the church that every other church I've been to has like this Egyptian, like really closed-minded mentality that has bled into the church because people just grew up like that. They think it's the norm, but like all the young people, and like we grow up in like such a different world, and we see like certain things, we're like, what are you doing? Why are we doing? And like we don't fit in with a certain community. And I think it's really good that we have a church like SMSV to fall back on, because if we didn't, where else would we go? Because certain churches have not addressed the issue of separating culture from dogma, and it's like causing actual problems with youth.
Yeah, sure.
And I think this generation is, like, before when people talked about faith, it was like you just took it as is. If someone said you can't, like, drink alcohol or, like, do shisha, you just took it as is. But, like, now people are, like, questioning everything in the church, because we're very scientific in the way that we approach things. So we want to understand why. Like, why were girls and boys separated in the mass? And then after people started talking about it more, they brought the two together. So now that people can go in families towards like mass, like small stuff like that takes so many years for us to like change, but it's progress. Either way, it's progress. And I think because, like, going back to the previous question about like how active we are in the church, because at least for me, like, my parents came straight from Egypt. Their culture is very different from ours. So being raised in Canada, and I was also raised in England, you can see how the generation changes, and you can help the future generation because you've seen the struggles, like weed in school, like the peer pressure and all that other stuff that parents don't necessarily understand. They're just like, don't do it. And you're like, it's not that easy sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, but those are all really interesting. Like, for me, like, I love SMSV because, like you guys said, it's like super different than any other church I've ever been to. Like, everyone knows everyone. Everyone says hi to everyone in the morning. Like, no one talks behind your back. Like, it's just, you feel really included. I love how, like, we have a diverse community, and because, like, Christ isn't just for Egyptians, like, Christ is for everyone. So I really like how that's, like, reflected within our congregation. But yeah. So let's move on. And okay, so I know you guys mentioned a little bit about like the traditions of the church. So do you guys feel like it's too traditional? Like, right now we're in a very like modern time. So do you guys think that the Coptic church is like way too traditional?
What do you mean by traditional?
Is the thinking like, or the mentality a little bit behind in some cases? Like, I think it's, you guys feel that?
I think it's problematic in some areas, but okay in other areas. Like, it depends what you're referring to.
So just like, can you mention a few things that you think are a bit too old-fashioned, I guess? like the role, no pressure.
I personally think like the role of women, and I think this church is like trying to really like help help women feel like they really do have a part in the church, because I know I keep mentioning women, but it's like so important because we are like made in the image of Christ as well. It's not just men that were made in the image of Christ, and like I think it's important for us to feel included and loved and feel like we do have a responsibility within the church as well, you know. And I just think that was really important. So,
and I just feel like the women, so this is why I wanted to have all women, because they're the voices that are like you hear the least. You know what I mean? Like every time someone talks about the church or gives a sermon, it's always a man. Like it's never a woman, which I understand why. But like for me, I think it's a really big like thing for me. Like for example, like some churches still like men go before women for communion, and like women are on one side, men are on the other. Women have to cover their hair during like mass, even without. I understand why we do it during communion. I understand like it's in the Bible, like you're supposed to cover your hair. I understand that, but like I think in the Bible it says like you have to cover your hair because it's something that like you treasure.
Like the crown of your head.
It's just humility.
But like I know so many guys that go and get fades and spend like $100 on their hair, and they're so proud of their hair, and it's like a crown. So like technically they should be covering their hair too, right? Like there's just like things that like that I have problems with too. And
I think in lots of thoughts. I think in the aspect of like women, for example, like the idea of like men leaving a church, like that's fine. Like men can be priests, men can be deacons, like that's okay. And because like St. Paul writes, like, and if they were all one member, where would the body be? Like everybody has different roles in the church, and that's okay, fine. Like men can lead. Like I'm not, and I have to cover my hair, fine, that's humility. Like I love my hair, I have great hair, but like but like when it comes to like serving in certain ways, like making orban, like I can sing psalms too, like while like I make orban, like that's like in certain aspects it's like completely ridiculous, but in some aspects like it's okay. Like it's not like I think with our current liberal government, we have like this idea like men and women should be doing all the same things, like we should be like, it's like, okay, rely, like there's nothing wrong with having certain men and women do different things. Like it doesn't mean they're not equal, it just means they're doing different things. But like in some aspects I agree, like why can't we make orban? Like I can lift flour, I promise.
But a lot of women take things at face value because nobody's explaining it to them. So you're being told not to do something, and you're like, and you don't, and even if you ask questions, a lot of the times people don't have a direct answer for you, and that's where there's a problem. There's no like united answer. So if you ask different abunos about different things, they're gonna give you different answers, which means there's probably no real answer.
When it comes to certain things,
it's not right.
We also
women are taking at face value.
Yeah, we have a responsibility to educate ourselves on the subject as well. Like 100%. A lot of like it's not just blind faith. Like it's not like, oh, why do you believe whatever? Like you have to educate yourself and understand why. Like something that really bothers me is like why do you, it's like, do you believe in God? And it's like, no, I believe in science. It's like, what an ignorant response. Like all of science literally points to God's existence. Like do you know what I mean? Like we have a responsibility to educate ourselves on certain stuff, not just like, oh, he's there. It's like, okay, but why? It's like,
when I was in another church, the aunt used to make me. She used to try to force me to wear a head covering. Yeah. And it's supposed to be an example or a sign of humility, which means I should be making the choice, not being forced on me. It doesn't make sense.
If I want to be proud, leave me alone.
Exactly. The one thing that's not really related to women, but I just don't understand even after listening to priests talk about it, is when people from different like denominations of church want to come and take the communion, they're not allowed because they're not from our sector, like the Coptic, the Syrian, the Indian, I don't know what it's called. But I just didn't understand why, because like we're all supposed to be one body of Christ, and if the basic belief is still there, then I think they should be able to come. Like I know someone who like she left her whole family and went to do a missionary trip in Africa, and her whole family was like against it, and she just went, like she decided to do it anyways. She went all the way there, she praised God, she was like changing her whole life, and they still didn't let her did have communion. They're like, unless you're baptized with our church, then you're not allowed. And I was like, Why should that matter?
I have a response to that.
I've heard responses.
Yeah, so like the one that made the most sense to me was that communion represents something different for each denomination. So some people might think of it as like you're actually eating the blood and like the blood and the bread, but some people might think of it as more of a symbol. Like, so I think that's the basic answer. I don't know if that's the whole, obviously, the answer. I have to educate myself on that too. And like you were saying before, like it's important to educate ourselves on these things, because even if you don't have a concrete answer, the more information you're provided with or the more information you seek out, the less concern I feel like you have, or maybe the opposite, the more concern you might have and be like, oh, that's going to open doors for even more questions, which I think is the case for women again. And
I think just from an outer perspective, it just seems very exclusive. Like when you're trying to explain it to like a little kid, it's like, how do you really explain that without sounding like, hey, you're not part of the crew?
But I also think like it's not just the technicality of if whether or not you're baptized. Like even at, like for example, if I were, for example, let's say for example I was like baptized Catholic and then like I was raised in the Coptic Orthodox Church, and I like, and then I go to like when I was in high school we had Catholic masses and like, oh, everyone's taking communion. Like to me, that's like a cracker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't see it as the body of Christ, because it's not whether or not I was bad. Like it's about where like my mentality stands, where my belief stands, and how I feel about doing a certain thing. So if I think it's a cracker, I probably shouldn't be taking communion as a representation or as the body of Christ, because I don't think that it is. So I think that if it's being limited, like it's okay, but why is it limited is what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the mindset of the person too.
Yeah.
So do you guys, just going back to the like the feminine thing or whatever in the church, or women in the church, do you guys feel like the church is very patriarchal?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But I don't think that's a thing. I just wrote a paper on this. I took a Christianity course. So,
Okay.
so because a lot of people think
Essentially.
like Christianity is like misogynistic, like it's all like men or whatever. And it's like, okay, when that might not have been the way Christ intended it. And like we're human. Okay, in theory, I believe our church is amazing and wonderful and fascinating. And just because men may have like taken the authority and like run with it, that doesn't. I understand that it represents, like we're responsible for representing the church, and if they run it may come across as misogynistic. But we need to understand that these people may or may not have distorted what Christ intended. Like, I know a lot of people, like, in history, they'll be like, oh, the Crusades. It's like, okay, but that's not what, or, like, the explorer, like, Christopher Columbus, whatever, like, he killed babies. I'm like, okay, but, like one person. Like, Christ didn't intend for that. Just because someone misrepresented it doesn't mean that is what we stand for. So I think even responsibility as women, like, we shouldn't be petty. Like, don't be like, oh, like, these men are misrepresented. Like, I hate the church. And some people might, because we do have a responsibility. Like, community speaks to people, and the way that people behave will speak to people. But as people who are born and raised, we have to understand, like, where our focus is. And we should focus on God rather than the distortion of his message in our church. Yeah. Which is hard to do, and sometimes I think we shouldn't have to. But I think that in the world that we live in, like, it's imperfect. We have to make compromises.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I think, especially for me, like, I have to be careful, like, yes, like, I have the right to find out why this is happening and why, like, things are different, but, like, I shouldn't let it get in the way of, like, my faith and stuff. But at the same time, I think now, like, we have the time and we have, like, we're all educated and we have the right to know why things are the way they are. Mm-hmm. And, like, I think one of them is because, like, the church is very influenced by culture. So the Muslim culture and the Jewish culture at the same time. So, like, for example, like, the communion thing, like, I know, like, people still say, like, if you're menstruating, you can't have communion. And, like, I think that's extremely ridiculous.
Yeah, nonsensical.
Like, how can something that was meant to be good, that was created by God, stop you from taking communion? So, like, I think I asked a priest one time, I was, like, maybe 13, 14, and I asked him, I'm like, why can't women have communion when they're when they're menstruating? And he literally told me, he's like, because they're angry and they smell bad. That's what he told me.
What?
And I was like, what? And like,
what?
Yeah, I was so confused. And then, like, people would tell me, like, you can't have, like Orban or, like any of those things. Like,
while you're
like,
on your
it's not
period.
even, like, just, like, the bread that Abuna gives you or whatever.
Yeah,
like, you can't have it. And it's like,
yes, I can.
So,
why?
Yes,
I can.
I didn't actually question it. So I took it when they told us not to do it, I took it at face value. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not taking communion. And I didn't really think about it until my sister brought it up, and she's like, why can't we? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, really? Like, why can't we?
Boycott menstruation.
Yeah, I was like, why? Like, what exactly is behind it? No, we've never been given a direct explanation as to why, and
Yeah.
it seems like every priest just gives his own opinion about it, and that's not the way that things are supposed to be.
And like
run.
you're like, you feel ashamed about something that's like
You're not
natural.
supposed
Yeah.
to be, yeah.
Like when you're standing there and like everyone else is taking communion, like everyone knows why you're not taking communion. Like it just like I feel like super ashamed like for something that happens naturally. So like
Some people like just don't feel comfortable. Like personally
Obviously.
speaking, like I took it as face value like my entire life.
Yeah,
To say all of a sudden that like you can have communion, it's fine. Like I just don't feel right within myself. Like it's a personal like thing for me.
It's so embedded that
Yeah,
I feel
it's just
guilty
like you
when I
can't do it.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just so that's like that with a lot of cases in the church. I feel not just with like menstruating. It's a lot of cases that we're just so like it's just so implemented, ingrained into us since we were babies. We were just told to do something a certain way, and we just don't question it. And when all of a sudden we're changing to kind of like fit into where we are now, like progressively, like it just doesn't work with our mentality that's already set in stone, basically.
And even in the Bible, the woman who was straight up bleeding for 12 years,
Yeah.
she touched him. And it's not
Yeah,
like
she
Christ
touched
was like,
Jesus.
ew, get away from me.
Yeah.
He's like, your faith has made you well, like, right on, like, good for you. And
Exactly.
and there's also the aspect of when, like, when women can't, so the idea that women have to, so babies when they're born, boys have to wait 40 days
Oh,
to
yeah,
be
that's
baptized.
extremely ridiculous
And I'll
as
tell you
well.
why it
Explain
is. Because women, apparently, so in the Old Testament, it says that when a woman gives birth, be prepared to roll your eyes. Women cannot enter a sacred area after giving birth. Don't ask me why. I don't know, effluvia, whatever. So they can't.
Miracle of life.
They can't, and so when they give birth to a boy, they're impure for 40 days, and when they give birth to a girl, they're impure for 80 days. And everyone's like, yes, that still stands. Like the women, it has nothing to do with whether or not the baby can be baptized. It has to do with whether or not the mother can attend, which is completely nonsensical because first of all, Old Testament, we're not Jewish, okay? There's a difference between Jewish law and moral law. Christ came to change Jewish law. Like there's a reason that when someone does something wrong, you don't stone them to death because retribution is no longer a thing. Christ came to change that. That's Jewish law. I just don't like the aspect that we've gotten rid of some sort of Jewish law and held on to some other Jewish law. Like, moral law is fine, 10 Commandments, right on. But, like, I'm not gonna unleash bears on people when they make me angry, like Elijah, you know what I mean? Like, there's a Jewish law that no longer exists.
Yeah.
So I just don't like the fact that we've held on to something from the, like, we're not Jewish, and Christ came to change Jewish law.
And giving birth is something natural. How are you? I don't understand the whole impurity thing. And what does that have anything to do with the gender of the child? I mean,
Exactly.
it's you're doing something
So like,
ridiculous.
so like basically the woman is discriminated, like basically from the day she's born in the church.
Like, literally.
I know, I'm like super like like it's
Your mother is impure for 40 days longer when she gives birth to a girl. It's like,
Well,
sorry,
just
I just got here. How is this my fault?
like how is this even, it's not even scientific probably. Like it doesn't even make
It
sense.
doesn't make sense.
So like that's my problem. Like okay, fine, we can like there's women can't make korban or whatever. People just say it because like, oh, you're a woman. But my problem is like people say things without understanding why.
Yeah.
Like you can question things. Like it's fine.
It's okay.
Like if I'm part of the Coptic church, I feel like you have to like understand everything and at least agree with most things. Like you can't, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, that's just my problem with it, I guess. Like nobody questions things. And I think that's what's good about SMSVs. Like we have the opportunity to question things. Even though there are people here that are, like some people here are very like old-minded. What's old-fashioned? Sorry, I'm cold. That are old-fashioned and just do things because that's the way they're done. And I think it's our responsibility as like this like generation or whatever, like that we question things and we make people want to question things too because we can talk about it.
But like, don't do what Martin Luther did.
Yeah, no. But like Martin Luther didn't even want to, like he just had to reform. So
Yeah,
he
but
didn't
that's
wanna
wondering.
create-
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, boycott the Catholic
Heathen.
Church.
It's pretty bad
They
then.
had to-
Not gonna lie, but yeah, hopefully it doesn't.
It's just I don't like that we can talk about it. Things need to change. I like talking about it. But
Yeah.
like, we gotta change stuff. I was actually just standing at the Orban room and I couldn't go in.
Yeah.
I didn't step in because I just out of like just knowing that.
I'm not gonna lie, I've been in it many times. Like
I've been in it before,
I
but
don't
this
care.
time there were some people in there, so I didn't walk
haven't
in.
been struck
But
by
like,
lightning.
Yeah. No, but like you guys know how like they're supposed to be reading the Psalms when they make korban? They don't even read them. They listen to a recording. So like if you guys are gonna make these rules and say women can't make korban, you might as well follow the rules yourselves and like do it. Like I feel so bad for my dad. Like I always like attack him. But like if you're gonna follow something, follow it like completely. You know what I mean? So yeah, I guess that's
because, but still, a lot of guys still assume like they know the rules, and I don't like. You're not gonna get into an argument every time somebody tells you not to do something. So I feel like we need to change. We should try as much as possible to change.
Yeah, I think like people feel awkward talking about it, like especially guys. Like if we like, for example, at the Mount, like our youth group, like if we bring up like menstruation, people are gonna feel awkward. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, guys aren't going to want to talk about it. Like,
actually, I found a lot of guys are more, like, feminist than the girls. The girls are, like, more chill about it, and then the guys are like, I want this to happen. I want them to get equal rights in this.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I've, like, only started to see that at this church.
Yeah,
at this church. I don't know
every
about
other
other
church, you say period, and guys will be, like, 5,000 meters, like, running for the hills. Like, they won't even bother staying in the room. They'll literally hear that word, and they'll, like, walk out.
They're so scared.
It's just because, I'm telling you, it's because, like, ever since we were younger, we were taught to say that menstruation is a bad thing. You should not say anything. You should not like take communion. Like it makes you feel isolated from your own community. Like that's a horrible thing to feel. That's what I'm saying. Like it's so important for women to feel like they have a role in the church, because if they don't, we're just gonna feel like we're just attending it because the men are attending and they're telling us to come. Like this is basically what it is. Like it's just not right.
But also like, so I was speaking to someone about this once, and he said like the church is progressing though slowly, because the church has only been like out of Egypt for something like 70 years maybe.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like, they're catching up. Like I know sometimes like they prioritize the issues that they want to solve, and they're like, okay, but like this isn't like really a priority. Like it's important, but it's not like the number one most important problem to be solved in the church. And like that's fine. The church is progressing slow. I get that. It's just that like again, like we have to try to ignore the perversion and distortion and try to focus on things and just understand like we will do our part to try to change it. And it is progressing very slowly. I know there are a lot of old men with beards who are running like our decisions, and they probably don't care about menstruation.
I think our Pope is very like, he wants to advance things. He wants to make change. Like he's talking to the Catholic Pope. He's like trying to make those relationships stand. I don't know if you guys heard about the oil thing, how they want. So I don't remember if it was the maroon oil, but you had to manually like keep turning it.
Yeah.
And then the Pope wanted to actually use a machine, because he was like, okay, we'll get more done. It'll be like more effective. And then the old traditional people were like, no, we have to do it this way. And then the Pope was like, we literally have the technology. Like, what are you guys thinking?
He has Twitter. Like, he's
smart.
He has Twitter. That is, like, the determined.
Yeah. Modern.
Like, didn't people, like, because he wanted to change a few things, like, didn't people want him to, like, they wanted to, like, basically make him stop being the Pope? Like, they wanted to, like, which you can't do, but people were against him for a little bit.
No,
what did you guys think of how he wanted to change the date either for Easter or Christmas? I don't remember. So it matches with the Catholics, so we're more in unison. What did you guys think of that? Because I know a lot of people are like, it's our tradition, we have to stay January 7th.
I'm one of those people, in all honesty. Yeah, I love it.
I don't think it matters either.
Like, I think it's really awkward when everyone's celebrating Christmas. It's just like, just give me just couple more weeks. Like, I'm right behind you.
Yeah.
Hashtag like, Orthodox Christmas. Hashtag Christmas.
Yeah.
I agree, but like, I don't know why. I just feel like I take pride in knowing that we have our own traditions that are not like conforming to another denomination. I kind of like having our own calendar and following it to the T. Like, I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. It's just like my own preference is that I like to have like my Christmas on January 7th, and like Easter sometimes it might fall with the Catholics, sometimes it doesn't, you know. But it just, I don't know, it just makes me feel like proud. Like
it's okay to like it. It's just also like, it's not a horrible thing if they change it. Like nothing is gonna happen. Also, I think it's for the Easter specifically. It's like tomorrow the Catholics are like, he is risen, and we're like, oh, he's entering Jerusalem. He's coming next week. Just hold on, guys. Give us a week. So it's just really like.
Yeah. What about the light that like shines or whatever in Jerusalem, like in Christ's tomb or whatever? Mm-hmm. What about that? Because it happens on our Easter.
That's the thing. That's why me and my mom always watch it, and I'm always like so proud, and I'm like, that's just such an amazing thing.
Yeah.
I honestly love our Christmas and I love our Easters the way it is right now.
Like, I don't really have thoughts on, like, I guess it's kind of like God being like, yo,
Yeah.
just change it. I
Yo,
don't
just
know.
change it.
Or maybe not. Like, it's not like, I just think it's not like that big of a
It's not
deal.
the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's just a personal preference kind of thing. Yeah.
I was actually having a discussion with my cousin about, you know how we do during communion, we do like the English songs instead of like the Coptic hymns and everything.
Yeah.
So she was saying in her church, the priest was like, no, this isn't right. You can't do that. And I was like, okay, so what is your opinion though? That's the priest's opinion. What is your opinion? She was like, I prefer the Coptic hymns, but I don't disagree with it. I don't think it's wrong. And I think that's the important part. It's a preference versus what is right and wrong. Sometimes people blend the two together and they can't see the
The
difference.
difference between it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just like listen to the priest and whatever the priest says is right, which is no, it's not all the time. Like I've heard ridiculous things. Like I know at like one church, which you guys will probably know what I'm talking about. I've heard that like the guys there literally think they're better than the girls. Is this like a thing? Like I heard like men are like they literally think that men are better than women.
Yeah, and they'll be like, Christ is a man. It's like,
Yeah, that's pretty. So my mom tried to take communion like in the guys' line.
Yeah,
And they
that
told her
one.
not to. They're like, can you wait till all the guys take communion? She's like, no, I'm not gonna wait. Like, why should I? What's the
Yeah,
difference?
exactly.
Did like when Christ said, here, I'm gonna give salvation to everybody? Did he say, oh, guys first,
Yeah.
and then I'll get to the women? Just wait until after I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
people like are always like, oh, why do men take communion? Like the response, Adam was created first.
Yeah.
It's like how
what?
I'm like,
You
those
messed up.
completely irrelevant like things. Like there's no basis for it. It's just
They just assume that men are like they.
Yeah.
For me, if a real man would be like, please go first, like all the women go first because they're the heads of the household. They want to take care of their families first. Not give me 1 second for my salvation first, then you can come after.
get my.
I like how they do babies first here, because I'm
Yeah,
like, that's
yeah.
more realistic. I get that. They're crying, they want food.
And they have Sunday school.
And they have
Yeah,
Sunday
they
school,
have Sunday school,
exactly.
There's
like,
also the ridiculous idea where like people like I took an Islam course this year and my prof
She's
was,
a
like,
religion major, by the
my
way.
professor was like bashing because she's like, yeah, the creation story, like women, like the fact that the rib story like says that women are unequal to men. It says that like women are a derivative of men, and I was like, and she's like, yeah, they're like a secondary animal to the human male, and I was like, what Bible are you reading? She totally took it out of context. Like it talks about unity and equality and oneness. It says like a man and a woman, like what it shall cleave. You know what cleave means? It's like the way that skin cleaves to our bones. That's how one they are in like the unity. And she's like, no, they're a derivative. And I'm like,
I would just like to say that God flew Adam into existence from using dust when
Yeah.
he shaped Eve. Just
Yeah,
he shaped her each time.
exactly.